Cathy J. Cohen is the David and Mary Winton Green Professor of Political Science at the College and University of Chicago. She's also the Deputy Provost for Graduate Education and the former Director of the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture at the University of Chicago. She's the author of the award-winning book, The Boundaries of Blackness, AIDS and the Breakdown of Black Politics. She is the co-editor of Women Transforming Politics, an alternate reader by NYU Press. And her co-editor is Kathleen Jones and Joan Tronto. She's currently completing a new book entitled Rebirth of a Nation, Black Youth and the Future of American Democracy. Her articles have been published in numerous journals and edited volumes, including the American Political Science Review. In addition to her academic work, Cohen has always been politically active. She was a founding board member and former co-chair of the board of the Audre Lorde Project in New York. She was also on the board of Kitchen Table, Women of Color Press, as well as the Center for Lesbian and Gay Studies at CUNY. Cohen was a founding member of Black AIDS Mobilization and one of the core organizers of two international conferences, Black Nations, Queer Nations, and last year's Chicago-based conference, Race, Sex, and Power. She served also as an active member in numerous organizations such as the Black Radical Congress, African American Women in Defense of Ourselves, and currently, ELLAS. I give you Professor Dr. Cathy J. Cohen.
How's everybody doing this morning? We'll pretend we're in church. Good morning.
Good morning.
There you go. All right. I assume you can all hear me. My joke is, can you all see me? I did that before Melissa could do a short joke on me, so thank you. I'm sure you did. So I do want to thank Deborah, Marcia, and everyone who worked so hard to plan and implement really this amazing, uplifting, and even at times kind of heartbreaking conference. I think it has been cathartic and necessary for all of us, and I just want to give them a hand again for their amazing work. Now, I have to admit that preparing for this talk has been both invigorating and quite humbling. I mean, what do you say to a room full of brilliant Black women struggling, surviving, and thriving in and around the Ivory Tower? Interestingly for me, actually, as I prepared for my talk, some of what I wanted to say actually I realized while playing with my dog. As some of you know, even though I was told I was very old yesterday, I have a 3-year-old daughter who is the delight of my world and some would say the bane of my narrowly constructed intellectual pursuits. Ella, my daughter, we could say, takes me away physically and emotionally from my work. And so for the last week, as I tried to kind of refine what I wanted to say today, Ella seemed to keep, we might say, getting in the way. In particular, she insisted that we play one of her favorite games, hide and go seek, at least the 3-year-old version, where her desire to be found is palpable. So she hides, sort of, often in the same place, time after time. And really what's great about the game is that if you don't discover her soon enough, she moves closer and positions herself in front of you so that she cannot be ignored. She won't allow Beth, my partner, and I not to see her, not to recognize her, not to feel her presence and acknowledge her being. Ella's game is not so much one of hide and go seek, but one of recognition and visibility on her terms. In her version of the game, there is a transformation in the power relationships between the person hiding and the person seeking. Now, I don't want to take this illustration right too far, but I do think that the question of visibility, specifically visibility on our own terms, is one that has really always structured the work of black women in the academy and continues to confront us today. We know, for example, from historical studies that the quote-unquote mere visibility of black women in educational institutions has been a struggle in which we have engaged for now over a century. We know from the comments made yesterday that the goal of visibility and presence continues to be a struggle for black women and clearly black men in the academy. So the existence, the presence, the visibility of black women in the academy should not go unacknowledged, unnoticed, or belittled. The ability to have the MIT conference in '94, the Howard conference, and now this conference is really a testimony to the history of struggle waged by women throughout the academy. As Melissa Harris Lacewell reminded us yesterday, our positions in the academy have not been handed over willingly. They were fought for and won, and those victories, in fact, should be celebrated. Through the work of black women scholars, we've expanded areas of subjects of inquiry. We've added depth and expertise to established disciplines. We've introduced new theoretical concepts such as intersectionality, while working to redefine what might be considered the normative subject, or in many cases to question the existence of any normative subject in the disciplines. We've insisted that black women's lives have meaning for understanding the continuous project of nation building, not just national crisis. But for all that I think we've added to the intellectual work of the academy, I wonder this morning if we might briefly explore the question of how do we maintain visibility and presence in the academy, again, on our own terms, reclaiming and empowering our position as both insiders and outsiders in the academy, worrying less about our kind of problematic positioning and focusing more on our transformative potential. I must admit that sometimes I worry that as we have become embedded in the mainstream of the academy, focusing on important achievements, clearly, like that of getting tenure and continuing to be a contributing scholar, I do worry, and I don't mean at an individual level, I worry collectively, that we've lost sight of the political project that allowed us to be black women in the academics, or black women academics in the Ivory Tower. Here I'm talking about really the political struggles, those waged within the confines of the academy by faculty, students, and community members intent on building new programs and departments and diversifying the faculty ranks. I'm talking about the political struggles of black women staff members who risk their own jobs in order to provide us with insider information so that we might navigate the white supremacist structure we fondly call the academy. I'm talking about kind of the political struggles that community members waged, knowing that they or their children would never be accepted into some of these institutions, but believing, in fact, that the presence of the community concerns needed to be there. Right? So I'm concerned at times that we may lose sight of the political struggle that was necessary to have us here, and the political struggle that will be necessary, in fact, to transform the academy. I should warn you that I'm suffering from a cold, so I'm going to swig water. Is that a word? Boy, black women in the academy, I'm going to swig water. I'm going to drink a little water throughout the talk. In part to also calm me down. It's nervous being up here. It's an intimidating group, a loving group, I've been told. Now, I was reminded as I prepared for this conference of the experiences of the first black women who won their PhDs. One of the first 3 black women to receive the PhD, all in 1921, was Georgiana Simpson, who at the age of 55 received her PhD from the University of Chicago, where I currently teach. The academy of old, as we might call it, was explicit about not valuing black women in any form. Many of these early black pioneers weren't allowed to stay on campus. Some had to repeat their undergraduate degrees before they could proceed on to graduate study, because the white institutions where they would do their graduate work didn't recognize degrees from black institutions. Some had to earn their degrees through summer programs or correspondence courses. So it was really out of necessity and the structural reality that they faced that early black women in the academy engaged in a production of knowledge oriented toward the common good, the raising of humanity, the progress of their people, but it was a process of knowledge production structured around their insider and primarily outsider status. They built intellectual communities often rooted outside of the academy in the black communities where they lived. Their interlocutors were not only or primarily their professors and other graduate students, but former high school teachers, community activists, and race men and women who lived in and worked in their communities. Today, of course, we face a different scenario, as many of the institutions in which we find ourselves today perform acceptance of our intellectual agenda and our visible presence. The system of educational segregation that exists today has adapted and evolved over the years. Many of the institutions in which we find ourselves challenge claims of segregation with a student body that is in fact visibly diverse along such lines as racial, gender, and ethnic categories. These institutions appropriate and promote a language of diversity that celebrates pluralism and difference with little transfer of power. Now, I believe, and I say this now actually as an administrator, that much of the talk of diversity in these institutions is actually sincere. Because what most administrators, faculty, and students and trustees want is an inclusive diversity. A diversity of bodies who share a commitment to their understanding and standards of intellectual rigor with a deference to the power of the disciplines. So while universities and colleges talk of diversity and are moving toward a committed and inclusive campus community, including the sanctioning of the study of black and brown men and women, gays and lesbians, and other marginal communities and individuals, in new centers, programs, and departments across our campuses. They're also committed to protecting and preserving the power of traditional disciplines that really define the academy and largely control the reproduction of sanctioned knowledge and the professoriate. These departments tinker with diversity on the margins, hiring maybe one or two folks of color to satisfy student demands and peer pressure. But generally, they continue to hold the power, or at least the veto of tenure, and define largely the curriculum that students will be exposed to. So much like the building of colonial power, universities and colleges have come to embrace people of color and other marginal communities as objects of study. But they've largely relegated such intellectual pursuits to the outposts or colonies of the academy, where we can be persuaded that having our own building, as nice as it may be, wields the same power as having our own tenure lines. And we all know that that just is not true. As scholars and activists, I think we have to address the way that racial, sexual, gender, and class privilege is reproduced within the academy quietly, without an explicit articulation of a goal of domination, or the maintenance of the status quo meant to defend and extend the privilege of white middle class and upper middle class individuals, most often men. Is everybody okay? So I'm going to be uplifting at the end, don't worry, okay? Well, maybe, I don't know. So I believe that one of the dilemmas actually facing black women in the academy, and probably most folks of color in the academy, is a decision concerning from where do we engage the fight for institutional transformation. Should our positions be located in programs and centers like Women and Gender Studies or Africana and Black Studies, important critical intellectual sites? But if we place these studies, for example, our studies in traditional departments where the primarily white faculty in these units will control their growth and development, I think we will find that over time they'll be diluted, if not eliminated, and at the very least mainstream. If we decide instead that these areas of study should stand on their own, distinct from traditional disciplines, then do we allow traditional departments to retain a normative focus on whiteness and maleness that is never forced to struggle with and incorporate the ideas, theories, and methods that are generated from black women's scholarship? As a black feminist in the academy, I'm concerned that through a process of increasing specialization and professionalization within the academy, many black women, and I put myself on that list, I'll put myself at the top of the list, find ourselves ever more enmeshed in the structures of formal academic institutions, at times compromising our ability to fight for and demand radical change from our institutions, both for those on our campuses and for the poor and working class communities of color that often reside around the campuses. We have lost, as Valeria suggested so aptly yesterday, we've lost our voice. Now, I'm sure many of you have read recently about the plans at the University of Chicago to reduce the number of emergency room beds, populated most often by poor black people who live in the surrounding neighborhoods. I have to admit I've been saddened and shamed by the lack of voice among black faculty regarding this issue. And let me be clear, it's not that I believe that the black faculty at the University of Chicago do not care about black people on the South Side. In fact, that we all do. I also know that, as many of you have stated already, that we are so overworked just with kind of internal demands that it's hard to have the energy to constantly police, and I use police, the racial politics of a place like the University of Chicago. However, I know that our silence is really not just about being burdened with internal demands and fatigue. It's also, I think, a reflection of the professionalization of black academics and black women in the academy in the 21st century. So I think on a daily basis, black women and men in the academy really struggle to make visible the very desperate conditions of black people. But increasingly, we find ourselves using a language that is devoid of the urgency and maybe the rage that these conditions dictate. In part, our monotone articulation of the struggles of black people is dictated by institutions like foundations and universities, who control the funding support for our research projects and the rewards for scholarships such as tenure and endowed chairs. We can add to the difficulties faced by black women scholars and black scholars generally the fact that many of us received our graduate training largely from predominantly white institutions, which sought as one major objective to replace our instinctive identification with the struggles of black people with a professionalized understanding of the importance of and adherence to objective, usually empirically based quantitative research. Thus, the false dichotomy between caring for the people one studies and the pursuit of rigorous research that has been internalized by many an intellectual, including black women scholars, has predictably, I think, led to a distancing between black women scholars and the communities at the heart of our personal identifications, our political allegiances, and our academic studies. Everybody okay? Now, I have no doubt that most of our actions, even our pleas and muted tones for attention to the condition of black communities, and specifically black women, is generally motivated out of a desire and commitment to better the lives of black women and black people. However, only tangentially removed from such kind of hallowed intentions is a level of mobility and access that was not available to a previous generation of black women scholars, and that at times is truly difficult to turn down. The negation of this type of support is especially difficult when we can justify our access to resources and the resulting compromises this ensures as somehow bettering or at least voicing the conditions under which black women with less and fewer resources exist. We have, in fact, been warned before, however, by previous scholars, of the perils of taking our presence in dominant institutions as a sign that the voices of black women intellectuals, if not black women generally, are truly respected and understood. Again, I think it's the position of insider and outsider that defines the precarious position of black women in the academy today. My current life as a deputy provost really, I think, exemplifies this process. My experience suggests, at least, that by the time most black women become full professors, they've also served in some administrative position, overseeing, and I use that word gingerly, but overseeing the work of our institutions. And many of us, at least I did, take on these positions with the hope that we can actually help to change institutions in fundamental ways. However, our socialization into administration often further complicates our identity with these institutions and the associated reasoning for why institutions have not made more progress in true and transformative diversification. You see, as you work closely with the president and the provost and other administrators, as you learn the intricacies of the budget, and as students come to view you as part of the administration and not the radical faculty member you thought you were before the burden and the privilege of tenure, I have to say out loud that I think there's a tendency to make compromises, to push a little less forcefully, and to focus and settle for smaller gains because you understand how complicated these issues really are. So we have to wonder, at least I have to wonder, what role Black women faculty play, or that I can play, in transforming our institutions as we ascend to new ranks of responsibility in those same institutions. Is it possible to transform these institutions from only an insider status? Now, I think by now we all understand that there is really only limited payoff from the insertion of Black female bodies into dominant white space without a radical political agenda. As we know, a politics of transformation must accompany our entrance and continued existence in these institutions if real change is to occur. But as I said earlier, I've worried that we've kind of invested time, energy, and capital in expanding our role and presence in the academy. But sometimes it kind of being without sustained interaction with surrounding communities of color. Sometimes without a politics of transformation in mind and clearly defined. And sometimes without the urgency of the struggle that first opened up the gates for us so that in fact we might exist in these institutions. Now, I was told by my graduate students who are here, they said, Cathy, don't end on a downer. You know, you're from Chicago, keep hope alive, Cathy, keep hope alive. That could be a downer. But so let me outline maybe 3 strategies that may kind of kickstart the move towards transformation of the academy. And I'm hoping we'll have a discussion because I know this is kind of broad and what do we really mean by transformation? Now, one possible means of transformation in the academy might be the crafting of coalitions that can mobilize to openly and honestly confront disciplinary boundaries that are reinscribed in the centers, programs, and departments actually that we control. Thus, scholars intending to transform that larger academy, I think, must take responsibility for making visible all the contours of who we are, both our marginality and our privilege. In a period that's witnessed the kind of increasing incorporation of the study of marginal communities into the university structure, we've also witnessed, as Ange-Marie argued yesterday, increasing competition among those entities to gain the favor of administrators and exert control over the diversity agenda. The truth of the matter is, I'm actually tired of white liberal professors professing in public that we need to have more faculty of color, but seemingly never able to marshal the will, the vote, or the power in their departments that they lead both formally and informally to significantly diversify those who are their colleagues. I'm similarly tired of African American studies programs and departments relying on gender and women's studies programs and departments to hire Black feminists or Black scholars working on GLBT issues in Black communities. And why should we accept the idea that white women and white gay men should hold the power in most of the faculty lines in women and gender studies programs and departments throughout the academy? The preservation of the academy in its present state depends on and benefits from a structured division of boundaries, right, in areas of study, subjects, and focuses of interest. Real disciplinary innovation and institutional transformation will only happen when we push the boundaries of those entities that we control to some degree, as the first step to pushing and tearing down the boundaries of more traditional disciplines in which most of the tenured lines are located. Now, I'm very clear that I don't want to sacrifice innovative black women scholars by bringing them into departments where eventually they will be denied tenure because no one respects or has even read her work. I do, however, want to figure out a way to force universities to struggle with the question of where innovative cross-disciplinary scholarship will be located, how it will be evaluated in new ways, and how the disciplines must change and evolve to not just incorporate but transform and include new perspectives, new methods, and new subjects. The disciplines, and I'm going to harp on this, I believe, in fact, we have to wrest power to some degree from the disciplines. Now, a second strategy I want to offer up for transformation, or at least individual maybe transformation, is really the reimagining of our work as intellectuals. It's an interesting, for me, development that I kind of ended up in the academy and now at the University of Chicago, where the faculty and students think of themselves not just as scholars, but as intellectuals. People often quote that the University of Chicago is the life of the mind. I must admit that over the years, including my time at Chicago, I've become resistant to the idea or label of intellectual, in large part because of the narrow and I think class-based deployment of the concept. And as I've progressed through the academy, my skepticism about what it means to be an intellectual as well as a scholar has often stayed with me, generating anxiety about whether I belong in the academy, as well as anxiety about my relationship to and connection with black people and other marginal groups that inform all my identities and actually who I am. It is this kind of tearing of the souls that I believe has been one of the most deeply felt consequences for black women as they progress through the academy. Many of us, I think, struggle daily with the cost of acceptance, legitimacy, and mobility in the academy, for quite often the markers of excellence in these institutions extract a distancing from the communities, at least those that we care about, for the hope of acceptance and validation from white colleagues that most of us will never fully receive. There are, however, numerous examples throughout history of black women who have transformed the classification of black intellectual both in their writing and in their action. Ida B. Wells, through her written and organized mobilization against lynching, is but one example. Anna Julia Cooper, Angela Davis, Cheryl Clark, Barbara Ransby, Beth Ritchie, Melissa Harris Lacewell, and Salamisha Tillett are others. Now, I don't have the space to detail the work of each individual, but in every case, these intellectual activists pushed beyond the written word and found new ways to transform both their analysis and praxis, changing the institutional setting where they were located, and in many cases, building new institutions to better address the desperate condition of black women and black men. These women, in fact, embrace their insider-outsider status. At the root of their success, I would argue, is their sustained involvement with black communities and their practice of a black feminist politics. While all of these incredible women found their way into the academy, it was never their final destination. In varying ways, each has traveled in and out of the academy, involving themselves in movements of their time geared toward the liberation of black women and oppressed people. More fundamentally, each has pushed the boundaries of how we should represent and understand black communities, rejecting a single-dimensional analysis of black people and black feminist politics. Thus, they push for greater recognition of the diversity inherent to the black experience, and that has meant at times that each would be attacked, ignored, and dismissed. But it has been their ability to find rage and on occasion act outrageous that has over the long haul facilitated their effectiveness. Now again, I want to be clear that I don't believe that all black women, be careful, share a standpoint. I don't believe that all black women share a racialized experience or a politics that would lead every black woman to embrace the category of scholar activist. Instead, I'm suggesting that one way to build a significant and meaningful community among black scholars and black women is to focus on our shared politics as black feminists. Now, my third and final strategy. Is everybody okay? Yeah. My third and final strategy might be the most outrageous proposal for changing the academy. And that is namely getting in touch with our rage. I've argued this before. People think I'm crazy, so there you go. It is my contention that it may take reclaiming our rage to spark new analyses, new praxis, and the transformation that each of us seeks. I mean, what do we do as scholars with our rage? The rage over Katrina, the rage over HIV and AIDS in black communities, the rage over the exponential rates of incarceration that confront black communities, the rage over the lack of living wage jobs available for black people, the rage over the levels of what people call black-on-black violence found in black communities, our rage over the absolute failure of public school systems to educate young black Latino youth, our rage over the rape and sexual abuse of young black girls and boys, our rage over the devastating impact of this recession on the already truncated future of far too many young black people. What do we do with our appropriate rage that comes from living double lives with a double consciousness, of being insiders relatively to a system that we could argue hates poor, marginal black women? Many of us have taken the route of attempting to control, mask, and even eliminate our rage. We've been told that this type of anger will eat away at us. More importantly, it's been suggested that we control our rage for the behaviors, the thoughts, and the desires generated from such a place make us ineffective representatives for the race. Of course, we all know that it's not the rage that is the problem, but the racism and the misogyny, the homophobia and the classism, the 8 years of the Bush administration that generates such rage and is the root of this evil. Therefore, it's my contention that it may be our rage, in fact, that saves us. It may be the rage that transforms our analysis and praxis, transforms the analysis and praxis of black women in the academy in the 21st century, providing a sense of urgency and connection to communities lost in our move through dominant institutions like the academy. Now again, let me be clear, by rage, I don't mean the kind of violent and uncontrolled anger that the dictionaries define, leading to kind of individual feelings of insurmountable frustration, despair, and alienation. Instead, I'm suggesting that we tap into and hold on to a different type of rage. We might call it a collective directed rage. This type of rage leads us to those kind of protected areas, far from the professionalized inhibitions instilled in us in the academy and other such institutions, where community-learned discourse can be accessed. And it may be this discourse, I hesitated to kind of call it our gut reaction, which describes the shared understanding of differential experiences with systems of oppression and results in most productive moments and collective acts of mobilization that ties us together once again and ties us to the multiplicity of communities and struggles that birthed us. Now, I want to suggest that tapping our rage makes sense because while black women have accomplished much in the academy, as we heard yesterday and no doubt we'll hear today, there can also be great sadness that is part of the work that we do in these institutions. For example, it's almost a rite of passage for every black graduate woman that I work with, and many actually that I don't work with directly, to find their way to my office one day, sit down in one of my uncomfortable chairs, clearly distressed and downtrodden, and begin to tell me about the lack of respect, interest, and engagement they receive from faculty members and other students, especially when their focus of study is on race and gender, or black feminist studies, or black queer studies. And very quickly we move to the revelation that they believe that they aren't smart enough, articulate enough, or well-read enough to compete with their colleagues and to gain the respect of their professors. They question whether they belong, whether they're good enough to be at you fill in the institution. Now, I'm pretty sure that most of the black women in this room have had a similar experience, possibly weekly. Witnessing, and I want to be serious about this, witnessing kind of the articulation of such a depreciated self-perception about oneself really is absolutely heart-wrenching to sit through and watch. How do you repair in an office visit, or 2 or 3 office visits, the damage that is really on display? And sadly, I feel like, often in the midst of trying to build that student back up again, I also have to tell her something like, get used to this feeling. Because no matter what position you hold, or what university you teach in, there will probably be days, sometimes months, maybe years, parts of your career, when this feeling of being inadequate will reappear. And in an attempt to be truthful with students, I have to let them know that under the segregated system we call the academy, they are likely to meet benign dismissiveness of their work and their intellect for the rest of their careers. And it's painful for them and for me that part of my role as a mentor in a racist academic structure is to help students both fight this part of the hazing process, but also at some level learn to live with it. So in closing, let me state again that by stressing, that was the uplifting part, right? Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna get there. I got a page left, so I can get uplifted. Let me again state that by stressing really the importance of rage and reimagining what I believe actually the Black feminist intellectual project to be in the 21st century. I'm not suggesting that we give up our positions as scholars, engaged in work, I think, inherent to the mission, really, of colleges and universities. Actually, I think it's because of the unique and fluid position of Black women in the academy, at once insiders and outsiders in the production of knowledge, that I believe our intellectual contribution is crucial and actually connected to advancing universities, but also the lives and struggle of Black people. Instead, I'm suggesting that as we have made progress in carving out what we might call free space for new theoretical frameworks and methodological innovations, we may have become a bit detached from the communal nature of our work and our political commitments. I'm just thinking out loud about how to hold on to our increasing visibility in the academy, but with an eye towards transformation on our own terms. How might we allow ourselves to celebrate our success within the academy, but also to imagine how we might fundamentally transform the power that is distributed in these institutions, building on the lessons taught from the Black women who earned their PhDs in 1921, who never expected to be embraced by the academy or to have the academy be their only or final destination. In my own life, I'm trying to take hold of my place in the academy, learning lessons from Georgiana Simpson and my 3-year-old daughter, Ella. Both of them reminding me of the struggle for all of us to be visible on our own terms and to transform these institutions. Thank you very much.